Hello and welcome to Keeping It Real. I'm David Grossman. It's great to be back for a regular show here on Thursday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. I have a great show for you today. I'm very excited. We have so much going on here at the studio. We have a live audience and we have two fantastic guests. The first one, I'm so honored that he's here, Brian O'Day. Brian O'Day has an incredible story. This is a book that he wrote. His claim to fame, I guess if you want to call it that, he smuggled 75,000 pounds of marijuana to the United States. So some people might frown on that. Obviously, you know, it's illegal. He's paid his price. There's no question about it. But he's reformed. He's a recovering addict himself, and he's learned some very valuable lessons. He's also a film and television producer now. So we're gonna talk to Brian O'Day about his book, about his life, and what we can learn about overcoming adversity, overcoming challenges. Let's face it, we're human and we all have downfalls, but how we get up back on the horse and ride again is what it's all about. And we also have Tamara Didenko. She's a commercial real estate agent, and after all, this is a real estate show. So she's going to give us an update, what's happening in the commercial real estate market. There's probably a lot of residential real estate agents watching, and they may be looking for some tips. Maybe they're thinking about how they themselves can do more commercial real estate and start selling some big numbers. Or maybe they'll see that Tamara is somebody they want to work with, and they can refer their commercial clients to her. So that's what this show's all about. Thanks so much for watching, and let's start off with Brian. Brian, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, David.
You're looking very dapper today. You have your regular purple shirt on, where we see you in this book, and on Redemption Inc.
Yes.
Recently with Kevin O'Leary. Great show.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start off by reading a classified ad. I think this would be a good place to start. After you came out of jail, you served a 10-year sentence.
That was the final sentence I did, yeah.
That was the final sentence you did. And when you came out, you had to restart your life.
Right.
And you put this advertisement in a Toronto newspaper. I think it was
Canadian newspaper.
In a Canadian newspaper.
Financial Post.
Financial Post. I'm going to read you some of this. Former marijuana smuggler, having successfully completed a 10-year sentence, incident-free for importing 75 tons of marijuana into the United States, I am now seeking a legal and legitimate means to support myself and my family. Business experience, owned and operated a successful fishing business, multi-vessel, one airplane, one island.
Real estate. This is a real estate show.
It's real estate. So we have real estate. Maybe you'll get Tamara the listing. She could sell the island.
She'd have to go to the police to get it now.
Okay, all right. And processing facility, simultaneously owned and operated a fleet of tractor-trailer trucks conducting business in the western United States. It goes on. You had 120 people that you managed, revenues in excess of 100 million. So this is serious business venture.
Right.
So you've had some pretty incredible experience, and you've paid your price. Tell us, what was it like to serve 10 years in prison?
Well, it was kind of frightening going in. The only thing I knew about American prisons was what I'd seen on television, and that didn't look very friendly to me.
Right.
And I was what was called a self-surrender, so I was given a date to turn myself into prison. I was given 3 months to get my life together after sentencing. And so I had to get, friends of mine drove me to prison, and I went and rang the bell, and that was the hardest bell I ever had to ring in my life. Mm-hmm. And, sure enough, the moment I walked into that yard, it was everything that I'd seen on television, that what I was afraid of, was just seething before me.
Right.
But somebody told me that cream rises to the top, even in that container, and I was going to be fine. And I was. It was, the only enemy in there was my mind.
Right.
No, there were no other enemies. They were all imaginary. It was all inside of me. I just had to get out of my head and get into my heart and trust that that would pull me through, and it did.
Right. And how did you deal with that? Like, how did you train your mind? Was it the writing?
Well, the writing certainly helped, but prior to going to prison, when I did that last load, it was 75 tons out of Southeast Asia, and I had too much money and not enough brains, and I had a coke habit. So I bought myself a kilo of coke for my own use. And without taking into consideration that the only way I ever did coke was all of it. And so I just proceeded to do the same thing with this gigantic amount. And 8 days later, I had a heart attack from a coke overdose, and I was pronounced dead at the scene. And I came back, and I just wanted to get sober. So I checked into a hospital for a month. And I wanted to stay sober after that, so I hung around that hospital, became the head of volunteers, and was doing 2 group meetings there a week. And so finally, when the cops showed up, I was sober, working with alcoholics and drug addicts who were trying to do the same. And my life was completely different than it had been. So how I survived in prison and how I have survived ever since that heart attack was by working on my sobriety and helping others to work on theirs. And through that, I started reading and a lot of what some people refer to as spiritual books. And I took the inside journey. I'd spent all of my life up until that point in an outside journey. And so this was going to be the inside trip for me. And the book came from a newsletter that I wrote to my friends who supported me when I was being sent away. All my friends, when I got sent away, were sober people, and they couldn't understand why the government was sending me, who was working with drug addicts and alcoholics, to prison for 10 years. It didn't seem to make sense. And it didn't, if they really had ideas about helping people get off drugs and stopping drug use, then they might have thought of doing something else. But the mindset in the United States and in Canada, and pretty well globally, is corrections is the model that we use to treat every issue. And there are better models, but we are seemingly unafraid to try them. So, I was in that business. I knew that if I ever got nailed, that I was in it at a level where I knew there would be a large price to pay. I thought 10 years was a lot until I got to prison. I met people in there who became my friends who were still there, who were doing 75 years for pot, and they'll never get out.
So, and how long have you been out of prison now?
Well, actually, I didn't serve 10 in prison. How it worked was I got sentenced and went to Terminal Island in Los Angeles Harbor, a prison that was built to house Japanese people during the Second War. I was there for just over a year and got transferred to Canada because I am a Canadian. And it took me 6 weeks to travel on Con Air from LA to New York, and then a bus came from the Canadian prison system and picked me up. And over a few weeks, I went through a few prisons, ending up in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, where I spent the next year. And after that, I was sent to a halfway house for 2 years in Newfoundland. And subsequent to that, 6 years on parole and 4 on probation in Toronto.
Okay. And how long? How long have you been free?
I have been off the chain completely since 2005.
Okay, so 7 years.
So from 1991 to 2005 was how long that sentence lasted.
Wow, that was
14 years.
That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so have you been able to use some of the skills that you had, that you used for smuggling drugs and running an operation of that magnitude? Mm-hmm. How have you been able to use them in
how did I translate them to this world?
Right.
Well, it's interesting, but I'm in the television and film business now, and the last show that I had on television was Redemption. Redemption had about 140 people in our crew, and it was just as vibrant, and I got to tell you, quite frankly, in the pot business, we had no guns. We were just a bunch of guys who were in the pot business. All of us went to university. We were just hippies. And we followed the trail of money in the business, and we did fairly well. We never used guns. We never had to. And after we got out of the business, it turned into a gun-burdened business. But I'm sorry, what was the question again?
I don't know. Why don't we turn to our audience, because I'm not sure if I see any hands going up. I know they mentioned before. Does anyone have any questions yet for Brian? Please step up to the mic, Joan.
Hi, Brian.
Hi.
Yes, I go back to your era, and I most probably used some of your substances.
Yeah.
But when did you go to the States compared to, because you're a Canadian?
Right.
Did you not have any problems staying down there?
I was never, I went to the States. I got out of prison in 1972, and I moved immediately to South America, and I spent the next 5 years in South America and the Caribbean. And after that, I moved into the U.S. It was pre-computers. They didn't know about my criminal record, and I would come and go freely. In 1977, my criminal record was uncovered, and I was refused entry into the United States, so I got different ID. And I used different ID to go back and forth.
You did all this importing into the States?
Yeah.
Okay, and how did you do that?
I had a shipping business. I had a fishing business. I had 3 ships up in Alaska, big 160-footer, 100-footer, and a 58-footer. They fished all the time, except for the loads that we put on them very occasionally.
So it looked legit.
It was as business as usual. It
Yeah.
looked like business as usual, and that's how we pulled it off, pretty
Well,
much.
good for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Okay, I think I remember the question, which was how do the business skills translate?
Right. And so the business skills translated simply by the fact that, as my wife said to me one day, she said, "You need to get a job." And I said, "Get a job? Who's going to hire me? I don't know how to do anything. All I've done is smuggle dope since I was a kid." And she said, "Oh, I see. Let's see. You did 75 tons, $220 million in business with 110 people around the world working for you in secret, and you don't know how to do anything."
Right. That's when you conceived of this advertisement.
That's right.
And then was that a turning point for you? What happened after that?
Well, it was a turning point. I put the ad in the paper, and my life literally blew up. I got 600 responses from all over the world. And as a result of that, I ended up on a TV show as a guest, a talk show. There was an actor on there who was in a Steven Seagal movie who introduced me to a friend of his from California who had developed it was called Mystery Tour, a travelogue for X-Files fans, basically a show that we take you around the world and tell you ghost stories, UFO stories, and that sort of thing. And they asked me if I had any contacts in the TV business here, and I did. I had a really great contact, and I gave her a copy of the pilot, and the next thing you know, we had a show. It was called Creepy Canada. And Creepy was on for 3 years. I wrote it, hosted it, cast it, produced it. It was baptism by fire. I got my PhD in television, I can tell you, by doing that show. And it was a huge success. We sold it around the world. About 60 countries bought it. And from that, I finished my book while that was happening. And the book came out in 2006 originally. It's been republished 4 times since then. And I'm working on another book, and I'm back in the TV business in a big way. I've got a number of shows going. And so the question is, how did I translate? Well, managing that many people, that came out of that business. My ability to connect the dots is the greatest ability that I have in my life today, that I noticed anyway, is my ability to see a situation and to see that certain individuals, certain capable individuals are needed in that situation. Oftentimes it turns out I know all of the individuals who need to be involved. And so my ability is to bring people together to make a project happen. I've been able to do that. I have a film at TIFF, for instance, that was at TIFF recently that had a huge response.
What was the name of the film?
How to Make Money Selling Drugs.
Appropriate.
It's actually, as provocative as that title sounds, it is about the failed war on drugs, ultimately, is the thrust of that film. It was really well received, picked up by Tribeca Films for distribution, and it launches at the Tribeca Film Festival in April. It was produced by Adrian Grenier, the star of Entourage on HBO, and directed by Matthew Cook, who is an Academy Award-winning director. And since then, since we launched it at TIFF, we had a hugely successful launch here. Tickets were being scalped at $100 a seat.
Wow.
Yeah, for a $20 theater ticket. I developed, and I'm involved with developing some projects both with Adrian and Matthew for television and in the United States.
So you've really turned things around, and are you still doing some work to help people with addictions?
When asked, I am. And I do some work with Paul Toby, in training business pros,
Which is where we met.
where we met, indeed.
Yes.
And what I do with Paul is I'm a change agent, basically, an agent of change. I have reinvented my life many times. And I have learned over time what has been the great preventers in my life from moving forward. What are the great preventers from staying stuck? And so, and what am I most needing to learn in my own life today? And that's what I bring to Training Business Pros, is my willingness and ability to talk about what I most need to learn today. And as I share that, I find ways through interacting with the people with whom I'm sharing to learn more about what I most need to learn in my life today.
Well, I was very impacted by your presentation at the Agents of Change seminar. There was a
Great.
few great moments. You know, you talked about when you knew you had to change the direction in your life, and you're not sure where to start, but you had to start somewhere, so you cut your very long hair.
Yes. That was, oftentimes I find myself stuck in life, and I'm sure, you know, I'm not saying anything that everybody here doesn't recognize. We get stuck. And when we get stuck, what that means, we're in position. So a movement has to happen, an action has to happen.
Right.
And I asked myself that day, what would be the hardest thing for me to do right now?
Good question.
What's the hardest thing for me to do?
Right.
Because whatever I come up with, that's what I now need to do.
Right.
And what came to my mind was cut my hair off instantly. And my hair was, you know, I had 2-foot long hair, and I was so identified with that look, with that hair. I was never cutting it. And when it occurred to me that moment that the first thing that came to me was cut my hair, without thinking for 1 second, I walked out of the house, I walked down to the barber shop, and I sat down. The barber was cutting someone's hair, and he kept looking at me, and finally he got up the courage to say, "Are you here for a haircut?" I said, "I am." He said, "I don't cut long hair." And I said, "Do you cut it off?" And he said, "Oh yeah, I can cut it off." I said, "Okay, then I'm in the right place." So $8 later, I walked home, opened up the door and walked in, and my wife was at the sink, and she turned and looked at me, went back, and then she looked back again and said, "Oh my God, you look like a billiard ball."
Right.
And so I knew that I had done something very provocative and something that would shake me up. And 5 minutes later, I was on the phone making a hard phone call that I was avoiding making for an awfully long time. And so, you know, what I like to tell people today, something as simple as this: if I'm stuck in place in any part of my life, I honor that stuckness by saying, okay, I'm stuck, and now I need to move. And I just take my body and I change the direction in which it's pointing. Something simple as that. Seems like nothing. But that triggers all kinds of things inside of me. Just that motion, because I am making that motion now with intention and purpose and presence to impact the need for the rest of me to follow the direction that my body is going in. And what direction is that? It's a different one.
Right.
Okay? And so I move my feet in this direction, and I face here instead of here, all with the intention of being informed as to what the next move should be.
Yeah.
And it never fails. It never fails.
Yeah. Well, I could really relate to that because I went through something similar myself. And, you know, you don't always know exactly what to do, but like you know, you look in the mirror. With me, it wasn't hair because I don't have a lot of hair to start with, but I knew that,
I've since
you know,
grown out of mine too.
But there were things that, you know, there's always things you can change. There's things that you can do differently, and it can set off.
It's
It can
like
be a
this,
bit of a
David.
domino effect, right?
When I first got sober, a guy said to me, "You need to change everything about your life." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "What leg did you put in your pants this morning first?" And I had to think about that for a minute. And I said, "My left leg." He said, "When you put your pants on again, I want you to put them on right leg first."
Right.
"What sock did you put on first?" "My left sock." "Next time, your right sock." Make little changes like that that don't seem to be anything. They're huge.
Right.
Because what it does is it breaks patterns, it breaks habits. What gets us stuck continually? Patterns, habits, doing the same thing. And you know, we're notorious for doing the same thing and expecting something different to happen. I've learned to
Yeah.
notice that when it
Are
shows
you
up.
are you doing this seminar frequently with Paul Toby, or how often do you do it?
I'm doing it more and more often. I haven't done it often. I've done it a couple of times with them, and it seems to have worked. I'm doing another one at the end of October, and I'm just playing it by ear. I've got so much going on. I've got 2 new shows with Discovery in the U.S. right now. I've got 2 films that I hope to shoot next year. One of them looks pretty good. Actually, they both look like they're going to happen. So I have to really be careful what I do with my time. I have individual speaking gigs. I'm speaking to 500 corrections people next week. Unusual for a guy like me to show up at an event like that, but I'm sought after in that field for some reason. But as often as I can, I want to show up with Paul, because I notice when I work with Paul, I notice that what I'm learning, other people need to learn as well. And when we learn it together, we learn it better and more.
Yeah, well, I know I've learned a lot. I mentioned some of my ideas with the seminars and whatnot have come from Paul. So I've been enjoying my the sessions that I've attended very much. So again, so people will be able to check you out there if they want to look up, first of all, on your website. I don't know if your dates are on the website.
They're not yet. I'm just building a new website right now, but everything will be on brianoday.com or trainingbusinesspros.com.
Okay, very good. So and we've got those websites, at least the brianoday.com is up on the screen. Of course, there's this book that people can check. How do they get a copy now? Is it
now you can get it at any of the bookstores. If they don't have it, they'll order it for you, or you can, if you read electronically, you can download it. Problem with electronic books, which I kind of love, but there's nothing like holding a book. And when people use electronic readers, you never see a book cover, so you have no idea what they're reading.
Right.
And I just love covers, and I love to see what people are reading. And I think, I like bookstores, so I always encourage people to get books at their local bookstore.
Yeah. Well, I've enjoyed it. So if you want to check out the book, you can go to your local bookstore, and I would highly recommend you do it because it's quite an interesting story. And also, you can go see Brian at one of Paul Toby's future seminars. So thank you very much, Brian, for being with us. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Tamara Didenko about commercial real estate. So hang in there. We'll be back in just a minute.